welcome to This is Homeschooling. I'm your host, Blair Lee. In this episode, I'm going to talk about unit studies. Unit studies can be big and profound learning experiences for your entire family. So let me get started explaining what they are and why you might want to use them. Start by defining what is a unit study. A unit study is a way of organizing learning around a central theme or topic. It's both contextual and conceptual, and that really can amplify learning and connect subjects in ways that are profound and meaningful for the learner, and it makes connections across the brain in the same way project-based learning does. For example, a unit study on oceans might have science, might have contextual math, geography, history, always language arts. You might as well always bring language arts into any unit study. If you're thinking, this sounds great, why isn't everyone using unit studies? Well, there are some potential downsides to using a unit study. The first and most likely thing to happen is that there will be gaps in learning. You can address this by making sure that the unit study, all the subjects in the unit study are cohesive and cumulative, and that there is a focus on foundational knowledge as a part of the unit study. For example, if you're doing a unit study on oceans, you're going to want to make sure that core science principles are built in so that it's not just your learner learning sort of one-off topics. You're also going to want to supplement math and language arts with a skills-based program so that your child is gaining the skills that they need going forward inside and outside of unit studies. Planning unit studies can be time-consuming. However, there are loads of unit studies for sale, so if that's an issue, that you can kind of erase that one. Just purchase one if you want to give them a try. Not all topics integrate well, and so those you just work on outside of the unit study. This is commonly done with math. You can incorporate some math, but actually to math is really complicated unless you build the unit study around math to have a cohesive learning experience for math. And unit studies don't work for all learners. Some learners find this sort of integrated approach chaotic. And so you have to pay attention to if that is the case for your learner. And the reason they find it chaotic is that unit studies can add to the cognitive load, both the external cognitive load of just all this different stuff going on, but also internally for those learners that it really increases the cognitive load to make connections across disciplines. It's worth working on those, but you're going to want to limit working on making those connections so that it isn't within the core body of what kids are learning. So how do you get started using a unit study approach? What is step one? Well, step one is choosing a topic that is broad enough to integrate multiple subjects into, but focused enough to explore in depth. Pick something of high interest to your learners and yourself, because you're going to be engaged in this as well. Think about something that could connect across curriculum and that also meets curriculum goals for your learner. And once you have the topic, brainstorm best case scenario with your learner about what subjects can be integrated into it and make sure and choose those that naturally connect to it. As you start to figure out what subjects to include, start by asking what subjects naturally connect. For example, if the topic is ancient Egypt, history, science, design and engineering of pyramids, maybe some geometry math with pyramids and writing, those all connect really well. But there's subjects that I left out of that. Art. I would include in that. Have fun with it as you begin to brainstorm and plan. Another thing that you should ask is, what are your learning goals for the year? Can they be met using a unit studies approach? And if they can't, how will you meet those learning goals if you're using unit studies? Now, you might just limit the number of unit studies that you're using, or get really creative with how you're going to include those in the unit study. What subjects can be left out? Homeschoolers love to cram as many subjects as possible into things. I was awfully guilty of that myself. But if you do that, things can become overwhelming. If a topic doesn't fit, figure out how your children can meet their learning goals around that topic outside of the unit study. After you've figured out the subjects that you're going to include and the unit study focus, it's time for something I love to do, which is look for resources and materials. So start with the age and ability level of your learners. You can go a little above. I always like to say a page width above where your learners are at, or you can look, if the unit study is extended over a period of time, where you hope your learner's going to be, but make these very manageable stretches if you're going to choose outside of their ability. Find books so that you've got both fiction and nonfiction. I loved to find my son's favorite genre all through school was historical fiction. And it was a lot of fun looking for historical fiction for him to use during project-based learning and to use when we did unit studies and when we weren't using either of those. Look for hands-on activities. When the brain and the hands are both engaged, you have a high level of learning for most kids and adults. Incorporate technology, videos, virtual museum tours, do real tours. Make it as immersive as possible. That is the most fun. Unit studies are when they're really immersive. And then look and see if there's existing curriculum. The benefit of existing curriculum is that if it's if you choose good curriculum, those are going to help your child meet learning goals because those are built into the curriculum. The key is to balance it. You don't need to use resources, every resource you find, even though most homeschoolers want to. Again, make sure that the cognitive load is well balanced and that unit study's not overwhelming. I've already brought it up a couple of times, but let's get really specific here and look at how much is too much. Because it's really easy to have too many subjects, too many resources. Now, a lot of homeschoolers deal with that by over-planning. So they think, wait, if I just have the right plan, I can figure out how to make everything fit. I laugh because, hey, I was guilty. I know how it goes. In the C group, this is something that comes up all the time, but you have to be really careful. Yes, you can come up with a plan that every single thing in there and micro it to the second amount of time, but that isn't how the best learning situations happen. You want there to be some free learning time where your learner is able to choose things that they find really engaging and be expansive with it and explore those things. And you can't plan for that because you can't anticipate what topics and areas their brain is just going to need to take them on a rabbit hole, and you can't figure out how much time that's going to take. I remember we were doing a unit study focused on astronomy. My son became so crazy passionate about learning about black holes. He spent a week. I did not plan for a week on the topic of black holes. Oh, and 2 weeks on dark energy and dark matter. I did not plan for that. But luckily, I hadn't overplanned to the point where our year's worth of, our study for that year couldn't accommodate that. And that's one of the things. Recognize that you're going to need to be pretty flexible. So if you decide you're going to do a unit study and you want it to be this immersive experience, build in some just free thinking time. And that's really important because one of the reasons that people use unit studies is they want to promote a culture of thinking in their house and in their children's learning situation. And if you want to create that, there has to be some time built in for just thinking within the context of learning. Unit studies are fantastic to use with multiple learners at multiple ages and stages. So you want to have the plan for what is going to be studied should be consistent for all learners. And where you differentiate is what the kids are working on, what you are expecting from the kids. So for example, if you're doing a report, older kids write a report, younger kids draw a picture, well, depending, somewhere within that, so that your expectations are staggered. Choose hands-on activities that work for a range of ages. What you don't want is it to be too simplistic for the older kids and frustrating for the younger kids. And so you're going to want things that work for a range of kids as when you're doing hands-on work. Or you can try a collaborative approach where the kids are both working together on something. And collaboration, I know that can be challenging sometimes with siblings. However, one of the benefits of unit study approach and project-based learning is it is a way to introduce collaboration within the context of a homeschool learning situation. You can, if you've got the right dynamic there, you can have older learners help teach the younger learners. This reinforces learning, especially for the older student. And then you can have shared projects where you have intentionally talked to your learners about where there can be a sharing so that you come up with a project and either kids are working on the same aspects of the project, or you have some learners, each learner has their own task, similar to how if you've got a group of college students working on a project, each person is assigned a separate task, and then they bring it together for a cohesive project that they then present or turn in. So we pulled a couple of comments that people were asking in the Facebook group, the C Facebook group, and I thought I would read the comment and then give you my opinion and my advice. So the comment: I spent so much time creating the perfect unit study and sourcing the materials. By the time it's ready, my kids are no longer interested in the topic. So that can happen. So what are you going to do? First of all, maybe get started with it before it's perfect. You can perfect it within the context of the work. The other thing you can do to mitigate the likelihood that that'll happen is to engage your children in the planning so that they are helping you with the planning so that they stay engaged. But honestly, the real thing that when your kids start getting interested in something, just go for it. Take a couple of, a week to plan it and then go for it. And then work on refining it, finding more resources, how you're going to make it immersive while you're in the middle of the unit study. The other thing you can do is just purchase a unit study that someone else has created and go for that. Look it over, tweak it, and then get started on that. Another question asks, how do I check and prevent gaps in foundational knowledge if I use unit studies when my kids are in middle and high school? Well, you got to pay attention to that. And then one of the things you can do is through front loading, which is where you make sure your child has the skills that are the foundational skills, and then you use the unit study. And so where they're applying those foundational skills, that's the way that you can be most sure that there aren't going to be gaps in knowledge. And finally, someone is looking for advice on giving high school credits for unit studies. Can you? Do you? Absolutely. It's actually a very profound learning experience for your children. If you're worried about it, it's not that complicated. So the unit study has core subjects built into it, and then it's a cohesive, interrelated, nested, learning experience. Well, everything those core subjects, you just go back to the beginning. What were those core subjects? You can give high school credit for each one of them And what you need is you need a course description and you need a syllabus. And then since it's going on a transcript, you need to give your child a grade. And it can be the same grade for every single thing that was nested into the unit study, but you're going to give a separate grade for everything. Now you might think, wow, so if my child spends a semester on studying something and maybe it didn't even take as much time, if your child met learning goals, even if because of this cohesive structure it took less time, they still can have these subjects unpacked and individual grades given. I hope this helps you. If you are interested in using a unit study approach, I definitely recommend it as a really engaging and meaningful learning experience. If you have any questions, comments, you want to share with the world a unit study that you've done that was really successful, please leave it in the comment section. And don't forget to click subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Much love.